Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party Network. The network is home to a lot of unique shows with passionate hosts, so be sure to check them all out on thenerdparty.com and at Join Nerd Party on Twitter. But here on the A24 project, we look at 2 movies from the back catalogue of A24 every 2 weeks, and joining me on that journey is my co-host Dallas King. How are you, Dallas?
I'm very well, how are you?
Yeah, really good. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone that's left a review in the iTunes store, from whether you're in the UK or America or Leith. It's been great to read the feedback, and it really helps spread the word. So as of recording, I think we're about 5 reviews short of 50. So that's been pretty awesome. Some of the feedback and comments have certainly put a big smile on my face.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we've had a lot coming in the last couple of days since episode 11 or 12. I can't even remember which episode we're on now at the moment. But yeah, no, there's been a lot coming in recently, and it really sort of gives you a big smile across your face. And, you know, sometimes when you record a podcast, you know that the other person you're recording it with is listening, but you don't know if anyone else is. But it's good to know that it's starting to find an audience, and they're enjoying what we're doing, and hopefully they'll be with us for the rest of the ride.
Absolutely, it's going to be a never-ending ride with the amount of A24 movies
Probably,
that are coming out. But
certainly won't be the end of the tour just yet.
Yeah. But if you're one of those people that's left a review and you've still got time, if you're listening at home, if you leave a review, you'll be thrown into the mix to win a Last Exit to Nowhere t-shirt. So if you leave a review, we'll put your name into the draw, and if you're one of those people that's already left a review for the previous competition, you'll be thrown into the mix as well. So feel free to chip in a review, some kind words, 5 stars, 3 stars, whatever. You'll be thrown into the mix. So check that out, and you'll find a link on our show notes as well to get there as well. But so I'm going to take you a bit behind the scenes of this podcast for just a moment. So this is our second attempt at recording this episode, as my audio completely crashed the other day when we were about 5 minutes away from the end. So knowing our curse with A24 News, it always has something that drops after we've recorded. So you won't be surprised to learn that we've got some new news added to the episode. So we'll dive in with some of our original news, and then there's a little extra at the end for Dallas. But this episode has been recorded like just shy of 2 weeks beforehand, because you're going to be away in India. So there's probably going to be about a multitude of different news, and everything will kind of come out now when we've got this one in the can. So if you think this information is going to be out of date, hey, now you know why.
Yeah, you can blame me for going off on my own Darjeeling Limited exploration. You know, while I'm away, they'll probably announce that A24 are teaming with the MCU to create a spin-off series or something like that. You know, that's the kind of thing that I'm going to miss while I'm away. I'm probably
Exactly. We'll just insert me kind of putting in those news at some points, or some sort of bonus episode extra. But we've kind of got some pretty exciting news. Last week was kind of a bit of a quiet one. We had sort of the Oscars and the Spirit Awards, but we've got some exciting casting and some kind of A24 on TV news. So Dave Patel is in talks to star in David Lowery's Green Knight, a fantasy epic retelling of the medieval tale of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So Sir Gawain in the Green Knight is one of the most famous tales in early English literature. As the story goes, chivalrous and loyal Sir Gawain, a knight of King Arthur's Round Table, accepts the challenge of beheading the Green Knight and must wait a year and a day to receive a blow in return. So, Dallas, what do you make of this one? Dave Patel is an actor I think is fantastic, and David Lowery is continuing to pick different films every time. He goes from something like Pete's Dragon into a ghost story into An Old Man and the Gun. Now we've got something like this. It's going to be quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to this one. Ghost Story was just one of my favourite films of the last couple of years, and obviously, you know, if anyone has seen the imaging for A24 project will know that we're both big fans of that as well. You know, I'd happily, you know, eat an entire pie by watching Ghost Story, but at a slower pace than Runa Mari. I would take the whole film, not just, you know, 5 minutes, because no one wants to hear that. Although I did say on our previous attempt at this that I would, when we get to the Ghost Story episode, I would eat a pie along with the episode, but we'll see how that one goes. But I'm interested to see if it's going to be a classical retelling, because we haven't really seen him do sort of a period piece, or whether it's going to be a modern uptaking of the thing, because the story in itself of, he's challenged by, this Green Knight says, you've got one chance to take me down, and then, I'll return one blow. And the fact that he beheads him, but then he picks up the head, sticks it back on his body, and then the knight is forced to wait a year to, what would you do with that year? It's going to be interesting take, in my head, I don't know if it's just because of the movies I watched as a kid, I'm getting images of Monty Python and the Holy Grail with the Black Knight, so I don't know if he's going to go in that route or if it's going to be something more in keeping with his sort of style and a much more serious take and a sort of look on what does a man do when he's got a limited time. So it's going to be interesting to see. But Dev Patel, he's, UK audiences and I sort of know him from sort of Skins initially, but then, he was in the Oscar-winning Slumdog Millionaire. But he's, recently, his work online are fantastic. So I'm going to be interested to see what he does with this one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, as you say, to see what a retelling this is. Is it going to be a period piece? Is it going to be sort of something based in modern day? Whatever it's going to be, a David Lowery film, sort of since Ghost Story, has been something that's immediately caught my attention. So I'm very curious to see what he does. And I mean, the sort of credibility he's built up, he could do anything. And I think this could be A24's first perhaps historical piece. I'm not too sure. It's going to be, I think we'll probably be one of these ones we'll have to keep an eye on in a 24-hour news and see where
I'm going to be interested to see, I guess, who they cast as the Green Knight. That'd be interesting casting. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He hasn't been in an A24 film yet.
There we go. But talking of someone that has been in an A24 film, honestly, we don't even work on these beforehand. Colin Farrell will return to A24 and star in the upcoming film After Yang. So Korean-born filmmaker Kogonada, who directed the fantastic Columbus, will direct the robot drama from his own script. This film is based on the Alexander Weinstein short story Saying Goodbye to Yang. And After Yang centers on a father and daughter as they try to save the life of their robotic family member, Yang, in a world where robotic children are purchased as live-in babysitters. In the story, Yang has been programmed to help his little sister learn about cultural heritage. This film sounds so up my street. I love sci-fi. Kogonada's Columbus was one of my highlights of last year, and Colin Farrell is just someone that continues to pick exciting projects after a ropey early first few years in Hollywood and perhaps Bellicus Angel. He just seems to be someone that is making really interesting choices, and his A24 films have been some of the most popular and some of my favourite ones personally, so I'm excited to see what he does here.
Yeah, no, I mean, when it sort of first started out, he was sort of appearing the likes of SWAT and things like that, and he sort of seemed destined to be fitting into that sort of Hollywood genre, but Miami Vice with Michael Mann and stuff like that. But it was In Bruges for me that really sort of showed me what his potential was. I thought he was just absolutely fantastic in that film, sort of really managing a great balance between the comedy and the tragedy of this character, this man who was haunted by a mistake that he made as when he, on a job as a hitman. And it was In Bruges is one of my all-time favorite sort of comedies. I think it's just fantastic, and I would like to see Bruges before I die as well. I would love to see it. It's one of those sort of dream locations for me. And sort of going on forward, you've got like The Lobster and Killing of the Sacred Deer, which we'll get to in future episodes. And I think when he does this type of film, I think he's hard to beat, I think. And the story is intriguing as well. I like you saw Columbus, I think it was at Glasgow Film Festival last year, and I thought it was just a really sort of moving piece. And it just the story gives me vibes of the Channel 4 series Humans that was on a couple of years ago, but also it's got maybe like a Kubrickian sort of Spielberg artificial intelligence sort of vibe. So I think we're not going to get like an Alita Battle Angel, but I think it's going to be something more in keeping probably with your sort of Ex Machina sort of thing, which is much better. And I'm sure if it's A24, we'll be able to point them in the direction of a great effects house, I'm sure.
Definitely. So, the next kind of bit of news is TV news, and a new adaptation of Richard Wright's classic 1940 novel Native Son is coming to HBO in early April, and it's a co-production with A24. So the trailer dropped this week, and it's the directorial debut of acclaimed visual artist Rashid Johnson. So Native Son stars A24 alumni Ashton Sanders from Moonlight as Bigger Thompson, a young African-American man living in Chicago who's hired as a chauffeur for a powerful white family, changing the course of his life forever. So it's really gotten a bit of an exciting cast. We've got Kiki Lane and Nick Robinson, who was recently in Love, Simon. So yeah, this was one that you think of A24 and it's got sort of a reputation of delivering quality, and then you throw HBO in the mix, and it certainly looks really good. It might fill that sort of wire hole that's been missing for some people for a while now.
Yeah, no, this is one which I hadn't really heard much about, and I'm not familiar with the book and the story, but I'd be interested to see what comes in. I mean, the casting is great, and yeah, I'm excited to see what this is, because as I say, I haven't heard much about it, but going on the recent run of A24 productions and distributions, as we've discovered over the last few episodes with certain things, maybe like Barely Lethal and whatever, that they're maybe not what you expect, but also maybe feel out of step with what A24 is known for now. But Native Son definitely fits in with what people think of when they think of A24, I think.
Yeah, I think at some point we'll definitely have to do some sort of in-between movie episodes looking at sort of the TV shows of A24. I mean, they did a really interesting show with Channing Tatum, which I've heard a little bit about, which sounds quite bizarre, so I'd maybe like to look into that one. And then obviously they've done sort of Pod Save America, which they spent money on adapting a podcast for HBO as well, so maybe we'll be in the mix for their next investment in a podcast to be turned into a TV show.
I would love to see that. As long as it doesn't end up like Tusk, I'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. We can only hope. So, and in our last bit of news that kind of came out as well, so A24 Television again will be releasing a new show on Hulu in America in collaboration with Rami Youssef called Rami. So Rami Hussein is a first-generation Egyptian American who is on a spiritual journey in his politically divided New Jersey neighborhood, and Rami will bring a new perspective to the screen as it explores the challenges of what it's like to be caught between a Muslim community that thinks life is a moral test and a millennial generation that thinks life has no consequences. So what do you make of this one, Dallas?
Yeah, no, this one sounds intriguing as well. As much as I watch all the A24 films, yeah, the TV stuff is something which I really need to get into and explore. It's slightly more difficult to see over here, but yeah, no, this intrigues me, and I'll definitely be finding a way to access it at some point. Yeah. And
one of the kind of big bits of news, so when we last recorded our last episode, there was sort of the teaser trailer for, the teaser to the teaser trailer for Midsommar, and that has now been released. So the trailer landed recently, and we still don't know too much, but the story follows a young couple visiting an isolated Swedish village over the course of their vacation, and they discover that its residents participate in an eccentric set of seasonal traditions. So Ari Aster's Hereditary follow-up certainly caught the attention of the internet. What did you think of it?
Well, a bunch of privileged Americans descending on a foreign country for a festival. What could go wrong? Fire Festival? Is it an adaptation of that already? Sadly not, but it looks like Ari Aster is doing his Wicker Man, and, we've already spoken on the podcast already. We haven't even got to the Hereditary episode, and we've already gushed about Hereditary on many, many episodes. Basically, I was in before I saw the trailer, but I am all in having seen this trailer. I thought it was really well edited. The use of music and sound was fantastic. I'm excited by the cast. You've got Florence Pugh's just coming off of The Excellent Fight with My Family, Will Poulter, who's shown himself to be a great dramatic actor in the likes of Detroit and also Bandersnatch. So, yeah, no, I'm very excited by this, and I can't wait to see it. I think it's going to be something really, really special, and yeah, I'm all in.
The one thing that surprised me is that when people watch the trailer, that you just have these white bars at the top and the bottom, and I can't remember who it was that tweeted about it, but I think they were involved with the editing of the movie and says that they would be a permanent addition to the film. So what do you make of that kind of creative choice? Were you sold on it when watching the trailer?
I can't say I actually noticed the white bars, to be honest. I was paying too much attention trying to look when it gets to the really end, when it's sort of flashing up and you think you're seeing things. I was almost looking to do frame by frame to see what was going on, but then I was like, no, I want to not ruin it for myself. I want to just, I've seen it once, and I'm not gonna, I've watched it a couple of times. I'm not gonna watch it again. I want to be sort of going as unspoiled as possible. But given how well they marketed Hereditary and managed to throw us off track with that one, I'm sure they haven't given the game away just yet. But I look forward to sort of nipping into my local cinema's projection booth and seeing the interesting instructions that are given to the projectionists to make sure that you do not crop it or whatever. It's meant to be like this. Because I always like it when directors put in little notes. David Lynch's notes for Mulholland Drive that he sent out with every 35mm print of that were quite nice. It was like, if you could find your way to making sure that you turn up the volume to ever so this, and then he wanted the framing to be just ever so slightly off, and it was just like, yeah, it was really nice, and I like it when they put effort into that. So yeah, I'm looking to see what Ari Aster's got in store for this one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a real treat, and there's been a new addition to the A24 shop as well with some pretty interesting jumpers relating to the movie as well. So will you be picking one of those up or getting it shipped to a hotel in America?
I'm not going to be in America for a while, so unfortunately that was a one-time deal getting that jumper. So, A24, you're not just in America now, you are worldwide, you have fans worldwide. Sort out international shipping. And get us the candles and the First Reformed hat, which I keep mentioning. It's going to be like a running thing, just like you not having seen 8th grade. Every week I'm going to mention about the hat. I need the hat, I need the hat. And then one day, I'll find a parcel outside my door, and it will be a hat, and I'll be the happiest man in the world.
I noticed there was someone on the A24 subreddit this week that had got Ethan Hawke to sign one of the hats while he was waiting outside, to see him on Broadway or something like that. And I was like, my God, that is the coolest hat in the world. You never wear it again, but you can imagine that having pride of place on someone's shelf.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Now I want a signed hat. You see, I don't just want a hat now. Now knowing that there's a signed hat out there, no, I need that. I need that now. I need it in my life.
So, kind of as we sort of alluded to earlier on, we're going to be looking at another 2 films in sort of the A24 back catalogue, and that is Amy and the End of the Tour. So, Amy is an Oscar-winning documentary, and it focuses on the life of Amy Winehouse, the immensely talented yet doomed British songstress. We see her from her teen years, where she is already showing her singing abilities, to finding her success, and then her downward spiral into alcoholism and drugs before her death. So, Dallas, usually I would ask, when did you first see this film? But I want to kind of ask, what was your sort of preconceptions of Amy Winehouse before you saw this documentary, or at the time of her, kind of when she was alive and going through her struggles?
I mean, I was certainly aware of Amy Winehouse. I mean, if you lived in the UK, it was impossible not to be aware of Amy Winehouse. Even if you'd never really heard her music, you knew who she was because she was all over the media, all over the newspapers. She was probably at that point in time when sort of social media started to take on. Certainly the internet and sort of websites and stuff like that the Daily Mail websites and whatever, she'd always be on those. But, I'd followed her career, I wasn't really familiar with her first album, but when Back to Black came out, I had a copy of that. Everyone, I think, had a copy of that album. I liked a few of the songs. I thought she was good, but it was this more sort of morbid fascination with watching this person in the press basically squander all her talent and piss it all away. And yeah, it was like I wasn't. I was looking at it as a situation where, well, this was all her own fault, and then watch the documentary. One of the reasons I wanted to watch the documentary was because it was by the same director as Senna, which was a film about Ayrton Senna and Formula One. And I'm not a Formula One fan, but that documentary nearly converted me to be him. I thought it was a fantastic documentary. It really drew you into a sport. You could know nothing about the sport and you still found it an enthralling, exciting film. And so I was interested to see what he was going to do with this. And I have to say that my first impression of coming out of this film was it caused me to take a long, hard look at myself, because I was as guilty as everyone else. I wasn't responsible for it. I didn't give her drugs, I didn't give her alcohol or whatever, but, I was, reading the articles, watching the news, and basically, I guess, yeah, you feel slightly guilty about taking a hand in, because this film is essentially just watching a car crash in slow motion, and, there's nothing you can do about it, but knowing it in some way you put her behind the wheel of the car as well. It was just, yeah, a very sobering watch.
Yeah, it reminded me very much of the feelings I had at the time. So I wasn't much of a fan of her music. I did enjoy Rehab, but she wasn't someone I kind of followed closely. And I was very sort of judgmental about her behaviour. I thought she had all the talent in the world. And when you saw the kind of situation she was getting herself involved in, the people she was surrounding herself with, you know, I remembered on sort of the day she died, and I always remember it was a sunny day, and me and my girlfriend at the time were walking along a canal, and we were just like chatting about, you know, sort of the day's events. And it was kind of like one of those ones like, so what do you make of the whole Amy Winehouse sort of death situation? And, you know, my feeling very much was that she had ultimately kind of brought it upon herself that, you know, there's only so much times that you can kind of go to the well of drug use and alcoholism and not face the consequences. And then she joined the, you know, the famous 27 Club. And then I remembered sort of, I don't know why I necessarily went to go see the documentary, but I'd seen sort of the trailer, thought it was interesting, and I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go and stuff, and then I was really blown away by it, and it reminded me sort of my kind of poor attitude towards her behaviour. I mean, she, you know, there's elements that of her to blame for sure, but there's so many kind of, this documentary highlights what a talent she was, but also the failings of her friends, her family, her loved ones around her that really did push her towards that early grave. And, you know, I've said it about several films in the past, but this one has just got that creeping tension where you're watching it and you think, oh, there's a moment here you think, right, if you take this path, you are going to be safe and clean and have a great life. But if you go this other direction, you know, death and despair looms. And there's so many moments you think she is going to break free of this horrible cycle of death and despair and drugs. And, you know, she fails to get away. You know, she doesn't really break orbit.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I sort of compared it to Bandersnatch the other day, didn't I? Where it was essentially, you know, you've got these options, you know, go to rehab or go to the gig, and you're like, choose go to rehab and whatever. But just like Bandersnatch, it's like there's so many different variations, but they all ultimately will end up at the same destination. And knowing that there's nothing that you could have done, and, you know, you can see that she's surrounded, you know, absolutely, you know, some of the decisions are absolutely her fault, but she is surrounded by enablers, and that, you know, especially her dad, you know, you know, he does not come out of this film well, and the fact that it is all sort of interviews and stock footage, you know, he hasn't been able to twist it, whatever. That's how basically he comes across, and that, you know, he was pushing her to do television programs, following her around, going to the gig and stuff, because there was a lot of people on that money train and they wanted their cut. So yeah, it's just really sort of sad to see.
Yeah, I think that's a really good description of it. I think one of her friends, Lauren, who comes out of this with a lot of credit, would be talking about sort of the people that would be hanging on to her, that, you know, in a normal world or something like that, she would have a long and happy life, even perhaps with her, you know, drug addictions and woes. But there was an amount of people that would stop her getting the help that she needed, the rehab. And I mean, it was there all along in the lyrics. You know, her dad is trying to stop her going to rehab, and there's a bit where it's like, you know, love, you've got to think about the tour, you know, this millions and millions of pounds, and then, you know, they're away on like a family holiday or like a getaway to Spain, and her dad's brought like a film crew along that want to film his life. And, you know, there's just, you look at the family around her, and like the husband for a couple of years, Blake Lively, he is just the worst, really, and he's someone that is just milking that for all it's worth. And you just feel absolutely horrible that these people have leached onto her, their family and the people that should love her the most. And, you know, it's really despairing to see.
Yeah, I know. It's like when Rehab came out first time round, it's like people, you know, it was a catchy song, had a catchy riff, but the lyrics, it was almost like a haha, you know, it's a bit of a joke. It's like, oh, they tried to make me go to rehab, but I said no, no, no. And then you sort of laugh along with her at that. But then when you watch the documentary and you realize that it's actually all true, and it's like some people did try to make her go to rehab, but it wasn't really her that said no, no, no. It was the people around her that said no, no, no. And yeah, the song, I can't really listen to the song in the same way after watching the documentary. And, you know, but of course it's not just the people around her, it's the press as well. You know, the media do not come out of this well. It's like the paparazzi sort of hounding her every single day, looking for shots, and specifically shots of her looking wasted and falling over, and almost goading her into attacking them and stuff like that, because they know they'll be able to sell those pictures for more money. And, the British media in particular, I'm not wanting to really compare her to Princess Diana in any way, but, she did have a similar problem with the media, and they love to build people up in this country and then tear them down. You just have to look at the the English football team anytime they go to a World Cup or whatever, where they're when they get to the World Cup, on the way, it's like, oh, this is our chance, they're going to be the best thing ever. And then as soon as they lose a couple of games, the media turn on them. The last time actually wasn't so bad for them, but it's like, you either, to paraphrase The Dark Knight, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And I'm not sure if US fans are as familiar with Big Brother as we are over here, but one of the early series of Big Brother, there was this contestant on it called Jade Goody who, became one of the biggest stars of Big Brother. She didn't win, but she came on a huge star. She got like a book deal, perfume deal. She was in all the papers and stuff like that. And she became a huge celebrity, reality TV celebrity, at least in the UK. But then they put her back in a later series of Celebrity Big Brother, and then she got involved in a racism scandal by sort of calling Shilpa Shetty a couple of names and stuff like that. It was all recorded on TV, and suddenly everyone turned on her, and she lost her promotions deal, she lost her endorsements, she lost a lot of work, she basically had a breakdown and stuff like that. And it was the same media and the same people who made her suddenly turned on her for this reason. And it's the same thing happened with Amy. She was really popular. People liked that she was different. She was a bit gobby. She was alternative, and then she liked to drink, and people liked that. But at some point, and it's difficult to pinpoint the exact moment when, but yeah, the media just decided to turn on her, and it's just really sad to see. And unfortunately, it kind of still happens these days. And even though, this should have been like a wake-up call for everyone, but sadly, I don't think the lessons have really been learned.
Yeah, that's the real shame of it. And, I can't think of many kind of figures, like maybe perhaps Meghan Markle, that have had sort of the press on their doorstep like this. I mean, there's bits where you sort of see her just like come out, and it's just like such a flash of cameras, and it must have just been completely bamboozling. And you wonder sort of people turn to drugs and stuff. But one part that you feel really sad for is that she's turning her life around. At one point she's just won the Grammy, and then she tells her friend that winning a Grammy is pretty boring, she wanted drugs as well. I mean, it's just quite sad, really. Sort of some of the footage that they've got of her and the interviews is absolutely brilliant. You see such a stunning career, and a real talent, but then at the same time we're also privy to the inside, sort of behind those doors, and you see like the needles, the Vaseline, those sorts of things, and you look at her and you just sort of despair what it must have been like to be her, how much she was hurting, and how much of a horrible life she had.
I know, yeah. I mean, that moment at the Grammys where I think she was in like a London club, and it was being live to the Grammys, and she just couldn't believe that she'd won. She was in total shock, and then, like you say, she couldn't enjoy it because she wasn't on drugs. But you see her recording with Tony Bennett, and her talent is undeniable. She had a fantastic voice, but you also see how fragile and vulnerable she was. She kept wanting to do take after take because she didn't think she'd done it right. Tony Bennett was saying, no, that was perfect, and she was like, she just didn't. I don't know if it was a confidence thing. She just didn't seem to believe in herself, and I don't know whether that was the people around her telling her that she couldn't do it, or she didn't think she could do it without, substances or something. And it's just a real sort of sad thing to see. But you're with her every step of the way on this journey, because what the director does is a very clever thing. And you've got all these interviews with like her friends. You've got interviews with like Mos Def and Tony Bennett and stuff like that. But they always. It's just, rather, you would normally go to a talking head where you'd see them sitting in a chair talking to the camera about Amy Winehouse and whatever, but you only hear their voices. It's always over the top of this archive footage material, whether it's home videos or from the media and stuff like that. So you never leave Amy Winehouse's side. You always are seeing her. So you're basically almost complicit in her downfall, which makes it, I think, such a powerful documentary, and I think worthy of winning the BAFTA and the Oscar that year.
Yeah, it really was an excellent documentary, and I think this is our first documentary that we've discussed on sort of the A24 project just now, and I think it's one that it's definitely one of my favourite A24 movies to date, and it's one that I really enjoyed, if I can say that is the word, revisiting this one. I was curious if the same feelings would still be evoked kind of watching that, and it certainly was.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic documentary, and a really good documentary will be able to take you into a world that you don't know and still be able to, well, I say entertain and inform. It's not an entertaining watch, it's quite a horrific watch, but you can go into that movie without any real knowledge of Amy Winehouse, but still come away getting an insight into her character and what it was like to be here. And yeah, I can't think of anyone who would watch this movie and not feel a little bit guilty about ever having thought ill of her and, had that preconceived judgments of her. I think you will come away with a completely different view of Amy Winehouse. And yeah, that's why it's so good. And that's why it's such a great film.
Definitely. So we move on to our next movie for today, and that is The End of the Tour. So it's the story of the 5-day interview between Rolling Stone reporter David Lipsky and acclaimed novelist David Foster Wallace, which took place right after the 1996 publication of Wallace's groundbreaking epic novel, The Infinite Jest. So Dallas, was this a first-time watch for you, or like Amy, a rewatch?
No, this was a first-time watch for me. It's one which I was kind of familiar of. I'd heard about it, but I don't think it ever really secured a cinematic UK release. Certainly not a wide release. I never had seen any screenings of it up in Aberdeen or even, I don't think, Scotland for that matter. So it was one that was actually really difficult to track down, but thankfully FOP, which was recently saved from administration along with HMV, when we were down in the Glasgow Film Festival, I was able to pop into FOP and pick up a few rare A24 classics. So I managed to pick this one up and give it a first-time watch. And yeah, it's a story which I wasn't really familiar with. I wasn't too familiar with the author. I'd heard of Infinite Jest before. I'd heard that it was this massive tome of a novel. I think it's about 1,000 pages or something, and a really sort of divisive and difficult read, but it's something which I haven't read myself, although now that I've watched End of the Tour, I have actually ordered a copy off of Amazon, although other book retailers are available, although it's hard to tell these days. It basically seems to be Amazon or nothing anyway, but I'm keen to read the book based on the back of this film. But for me, it was an interesting film. Even though apparently it is based on a true story, I did find it slightly formulaic in its plot structure, but I'll get into that in a bit. But what about yourself? Was this a first-time watch for you?
Yeah, I was really excited for this one because we sort of do this as sort of double bills, and very rarely do we get one film that sort of matches up in similar kind of genres as this. And I thought, well, you know what? I looked at that and I saw the pictures, and I thought, you know what? This looks like it's going to be about a music tour or something to that effect. And, and I was like, right, I can almost picture the tweet now. This week on the A24 project, we look at 2 films that look at music in a different way. And obviously that wasn't the case. It was looking at sort of being an author and writing and so on. And then I got to the end and I was like, yeah, that was an interesting kind of story. I wonder where the inspiration for that came around. I never actually realised that even when I was watching the movie, I thought, yeah, this is just like a fictional story. I never realised that it was a true story at all. And I sort of heard the name David Foster Wallace before, but I just assumed it was the name of one of the office characters, one of the bosses, and I was very sorely mistaken. And I enjoyed this one. I enjoy movies sometimes about people just talking, whether it's in cars or at restaurants or whatever. I think it's certainly an interesting movie, and it poses some good questions, what it's like to be an author, but I felt that I probably need to rewatch it again, knowing that this is actually based on real people, a real book, and that might actually enhance my viewing of it, as opposed to thinking it's some sort of, here's another story written about white men talking about what it's like to be a tortured artist.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you read the synopsis and you sort of see this story of a journalist following an author on tour, sort of not really asking the hard-hitting questions. There's his boss is wanting him to basically ask about, drug addiction and stuff like this, but he seems to skirt around it, and it's like he's not, he becomes too familiar and too friendly with him in a similar way. So there is definitely comparisons with Almost Famous, Cameron Crowe's one, about the young kid who goes off on tour with the band and sort of becomes their friend and wants to write a really nice story, but then, realizes that he does have to ask the hard-hitting questions, and then, there comes a point where, they kind of have a falling out. But then, and it happens in this one as well, around about sort of day 3 or 4, they have a bit of a falling out, but, they're going to make it up again, become friends again before the end of the tour, end of the tour, because the film's the end of the tour. And, I think what the film does work is it works on the chemistry between the two leads. Jesse Eisenberg is the writer for Rolling Stone, and Jason Segel is is David Foster Wallace. And I thought he was really good in this. He's someone who I know from comedy films such as, The 5 Year Engagement, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and The Muppet Movie. I've never really watched How I Met Your Mother, so I'm not really familiar with him with that.
Please tell me you've watched
But
Freaks and
I thought he
Geeks.
was very good in a series. I haven't watched Freaks and Geeks either. No,
You're missing out. I think it's...
Is that a missing frame?
You've got to watch. I think it's on Netflix or Amazon Prime, but it's like one of the greatest TV shows of all time, and you will 100% relate to it. So it's like about nerds and stoners in the early 80s, and it has a hell of a cast. It's got James Franco, Linda Carradine, the guy who's bloody writing Spider-Man Homecoming. You have James Franco, Sam Levine, Seth Rogen, Martin Starr. It is so good. Busy Phillips. It is one of the best TV shows of all time. Did 13 episodes and then it was cancelled, and that was like my introduction to someone like Jason Segel. You have to watch it. So if you've got a long haul flight coming up and it's on Netflix, get everything downloaded. No,
it's not on Netflix. Well, certainly not on Netflix UK. I'll have to find it another way. I'll rent it from my library. That's what
I don't even think there's a box set of it. By
it's
the
on
way,
my list. I'll add it to my
UK.
list.
I don't think there's a box set.
It's never been released on DVD.
DVD import.
Oh well, I see. Well, that's it. We've sidetracked slightly talking about Freaks and Geeks, but Jason Segel. I will check out his other comedy work. I will try and rectify that by the time I am back from India, and we can reconvene and talk about that one. But yeah, I was impressed with his dramatic work in this. What did you think of him?
I thought he was really good in this performance, and I kind of thought, based on sort of the cast, it was going to be potentially a comedy that we were going to be getting, and this was a real kind of pleasant surprise, and sort of what the point of this whole sort of project for me was that I always think of A24 and a lot of the big hitted names and some of the lesser known ones I was familiar with, but something like this, I don't think I would ever have watched it, made the effort to find it if it wasn't for something like this. And I think I was rewarded with an interesting movie, and for someone like yourself, you're now going to make the commitment to watch it, to reading a 1,000-piece tome of a novel.
Yeah, that's I said, like I say, I'm going on a 13-hour flight to India, and we'll have a 13-hour flight back. So I can see how many pages I get through during that time. So,
do you have any kind of final thoughts on the end of the tour?
A good film. I think it's one which kind of fits in with the A24 sort of template and palette so far. It feels certainly more fitting with their work than, say, like a Barely Lethal or something like that. So yeah, I think it's I can understand why they did it. I think it's an interesting story, a story that a lot of people probably won't be aware of, and I think it shines a light on that. And I think for that reason, it's definitely worth a watch. I mean, I think it will end up being sort of like maybe mid to lower tier towards the end, but I'm glad that I watched it. And yeah, it's like I say, it's a jumping off point for other things, for more either reading new books or looking at more films. And yeah, no, I think it's definitely one to recommend.
Definitely. So thank you very much to everyone that is listening to this, leaving reviews, and we're looking forward to joining you in 2 more weeks where we'll discuss the next 2 movies in this movie. So thanks again to everyone for listening, and have an A24 day. Bye.